The smell of charcoal and corporate politics hung thick in the summer air as I stood beside the barbecue station, watching my wife Marina laugh at something Pierce Eldrow had whispered in her ear. 20 years of marriage, and I could read her body language like a blueprint. The way she leaned into him, the flutter of her fingers against his arm. These weren't the gestures of casual workplace friendship. "Evan, right?" Pierce appeared beside me, beer in hand, that practiced smile plastered across his face. Regional Director Pierce Eldrow, Marina's boss, the golden boy who'd climbed the corporate ladder at Callen Architecture with suspicious speed. "Marina's told me so much about you." I kept my expression neutral, years of construction work having taught me the value of silence. Let the other guy talk first. Let him reveal his hand. Pierce leaned closer, beer confidence making him bold. "She tells me everything, you know, even things she'd never tell you." His smirk widened, enjoying what he thought was his moment of superiority. The barbecue tongs felt heavy in my grip. Around us, the company picnic continued. Architects and project managers playing volleyball, their children splashing in the lake, everyone pretending this was about team building instead of office politics. Marina caught my eye from across the lawn and waved, her smile bright and false. "Did she tell you I own 60% of this company?" I asked quietly. Pierce's smirk faltered. The beer bottle paused halfway to his lips. "What?" I turned to face him fully, noting how his tan seemed to fade around the edges. "Braskin Holdings, shell company I set up 3 years ago when your founders came begging for Series B funding. Marina knows me as a construction contractor who does some consulting work. She doesn't know her husband is the majority shareholder who signs off on executive bonuses." The volleyball game continued behind us. Someone's child shrieked with laughter as they cannonballed into the lake. Normal sounds of a normal summer day, while Pierce Eldrow's world quietly imploded. "You're lying." "Am I?" I pulled out my phone, scrolled to a familiar email thread. "Here's last month's board meeting minutes. My signature approving your 15% raise, and here's the quarterly projections you've been sharing with someone outside the company. Every secret Marina whispered to you over dinner, every confidential number you thought was pillow talk, I've been watching it all get passed along." Pierce's face had gone pale beneath his weekend tan. "I don't know what you're talking about. 18 months of intercepted emails, Pierce. Your communications with David Chen at Meridian Group, stock trades that preceded each leaked announcement by exactly 72 hours. The SEC loves patterns like that." Marina was walking toward us now, her sundress bright against the green lawn, completely unaware that her world was about to change forever. She'd been sharing company secrets with Pierce, thinking she was impressing her boss with her insider knowledge. Pierce had been selling those secrets to competitors, building his own golden parachute while planning to leave Callen Architecture in ruins. "What do you want?" Pierce's voice had dropped to a whisper. "Your resignation letter on my desk by Monday morning, clean, quiet, no drama. In exchange, I'll make sure the SEC investigation focuses on the buyer, not the seller." Marina reached us, slipping her arm through Pierce's with casual intimacy that made my stomach clench. "What are you two talking about so seriously?" "Just business," I said, meeting Pierce's eyes. "Pierce was just telling me how much he's learned from working with you." "Oh, Evan's being modest," Marina laughed, the sound sharp in the summer air. "He always acts like he doesn't understand what I do at work." Pierce managed a weak smile. "Your husband's full of surprises." That evening, Marina and I sat on our deck overlooking the lake, the remains of takeout Chinese scattered between us. She was scrolling through her phone, probably texting Pierce about the strange conversation at the picnic. I watched her fingers dance across the screen, each message another nail in her own coffin. "How was the picnic for you?" she asked without looking up. "Enlightening." She glanced at me then, something flickering in her expression. "Pierce mentioned you two had an interesting conversation." Did he? I leaned back in my chair, studying her face in the fading light. What else did Pierce mention? Nothing specific, but her fingers had stilled on the phone screen. Just that you seemed to know more about the business than he expected. I could have told her then, could have laid out the whole truth. How I'd saved her company from bankruptcy, how I'd been watching Pierce systematically steal and sell her confidential information, how her pillow talk had been funding his stock portfolio while undermining everything she'd worked to build. Instead, I stood up and started clearing the table. I'm full of surprises. Monday morning, I sat in my home office, coffee growing cold as I waited. The Callen Architecture building was visible from my window, a sleek glass structure I'd helped finance through Braskin Holdings. Marina had left early, eager to get to work, probably planning to ask Pierce about our conversation at the picnic. My computer chimed with an incoming email. Subject: resignation, effective immediately. Pierce's letter was brief, professional, requesting confidentiality regarding his departure for personal reasons. I forwarded it to the board members with a single line: approved. Begin transition immediately. Then I opened the folder I'd been building for 18 months. Screenshots of Pierce's communications with Meridian Group, bank records showing suspicious stock trades, email threads where Marina's confidential information appeared word for word in Pierce's messages to competitors. The SEC investigation would begin with an anonymous tip about insider trading at Meridian Group. They'd find Pierce's communications, trace the information back to its source, and discover the systematic corporate espionage that had been bleeding Callen Architecture dry. Pierce would be unemployable in the industry within a month, his reputation destroyed by his own greed. But Marina would face a different kind of reckoning. My phone rang. Marina's number. Evan? Pierce just resigned, out of nowhere, effective immediately. The whole office is in chaos. That's unfortunate, I said, opening another file on my computer. This one contained every text message Marina had sent Pierce over the past year, every dinner photo they'd shared, every intimate detail she'd revealed about our marriage and her work. I don't understand it. He seemed fine at the picnic yesterday. People aren't always what they seem. There was a long pause. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'll see you at dinner, Marina. We need to talk. Marina came home that evening carrying a bottle of wine and wearing the expression she reserved for difficult conversations. I'd seen that look before, when she'd wanted to buy the lake house, when she'd pushed for the promotion that put her directly under Pierce's supervision, when she'd started working late 3 nights a week. Crazy day, she said, setting the wine on the kitchen counter with deliberate care. Pierce's resignation has everyone scrambling. The board called an emergency meeting for tomorrow. I was making dinner, something simple that wouldn't require much attention. My hands stayed busy while I watched her in my peripheral vision, noting the tension in her shoulders, the way she avoided direct eye contact. Any idea why he left so suddenly? She opened the wine with more force than necessary. None. He seemed perfectly happy yesterday. We were discussing the Morrison project just last week, making plans for the next quarter. She poured 2 glasses, offered me one. Did you say something to him at the picnic? We talked. I accepted the wine, but didn't drink. About business, about loyalty, about the consequences of betrayal. Marina's laugh sounded forced. You make it sound so dramatic. Pierce is ambitious, sure, but he's not disloyal. He's been instrumental in landing our biggest contracts. I turned from the stove to face her fully. Has he? Or has he been selling our competitive advantages to the highest bidder? The color drained from her face. What are you talking about? Sit down, Marina. She remained standing, wine glass clutched in both hands like a shield. Evan, you're scaring me. What's going on? I pulled out my laptop, opened it on the kitchen island between us. The screen displayed an email thread, Pierce's messages to David Chen at Meridian Group clearly visible. This is from 6 months ago. Pierce is sharing the Morrison project specifications with our biggest competitor. The same specifications you brought home to work on, the same numbers you discussed with him over dinner. Marina leaned forward, squinting at the screen. I watched recognition dawn in her eyes as she read Pierce's words. Her words, the confidential information she'd shared in what she thought were private moments. I don't understand. How did you get these? I hired a forensic accountant last year when I noticed some irregularities in the company's performance. Contracts we should have won going to competitors who somehow knew our exact bids. Projects getting delayed when key information leaked to regulatory agencies. I scrolled to another email. Everything traces back to Pierce. And everything Pierce knew, he learned from you. She set down the wine glass with shaking hands. Are you saying this is my fault? I'm saying you've been sharing confidential company information with someone who was selling it. Every intimate dinner conversation, every time you brought work home and discussed it with him, every detail about our financial position and strategic planning, it all ended up in competitor hands. Marina sank into a chair, staring at the laptop screen. We never discussed work it wasn't like that. Pierce was my mentor, my boss. Of course we talked about projects. Your boss, right. I opened another folder, this one containing restaurant receipts, hotel charges, credit card statements. The Riverside Inn, every Thursday for 6 months. The Morrison Hotel downtown, weekend conferences that somehow only required one room. The jewelry charges on Pierce's company card, always followed by you wearing something new to work. She looked up at me then, and I saw the exact moment she realized how much I knew. Not just about the corporate espionage, but about everything. The affair she thought she'd hidden, the relationship she'd convinced herself was professional advancement, the betrayal that had been eating away at our marriage for over a year. Evan, I can explain. Can you? I closed the laptop. Can you explain how pillow talk with your lover ended up costing the company I own millions in lost contracts? Can you explain how your professional mentorship required hotel rooms and expensive jewelry? Marina's composure finally cracked. You own the company? What are you talking about? Braskin Holdings, shell company I created when Callen Architecture was facing bankruptcy 3 years ago. Your founders needed Series B funding, and I provided it. 60% controlling interest, with the agreement that my involvement would remain confidential. I picked up my wine glass, finally taking a sip. I've been protecting your job, Marina. Protecting the company you love, the career you've built, and you've been systematically destroying it from the inside. She stood up abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked the lake. You've been spying on me, on us. For how long? Long enough to document 18 months of corporate espionage. Long enough to trace every leak back to its source. Long enough to build a case that will destroy Pierce professionally and put Meridian Group under federal investigation. What about me? Her voice was barely a whisper. I joined her at the window. The lake was calm in the evening light, peaceful and deceptive. That depends on what you do next. What do you mean? Pierce is finished. His resignation was just the beginning. The SEC will be investigating his stock trades within the week, and when they trace the information sources, they'll find a pattern of systematic insider trading. He'll never work in this industry again. Marina turned to face me, tears starting to form in her eyes. And me? You were an unwitting accomplice, a source who didn't realize she was being used. The question is whether you want to remain that, or whether you want to take responsibility for what you've done to our marriage and to the company. She was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the lake. When she spoke, her voice was steady again, controlled. What do you want, Evan? I want the truth, all of it. How long the affair has been going on, what information you shared, who else might be involved. I want you to help me identify every leak, every compromised project, every way Pierce has been bleeding this company. And then? And then we figure out whether there's anything left of our marriage worth saving. Marina nodded slowly. The board meeting tomorrow, you'll be there? I'll be there. As the majority shareholder, not as your husband, Pierce's resignation is just the first step in cleaning up this mess. She walked back to the kitchen island, picked up her wine glass, drained it in one long swallow. I never meant for any of this to happen. But it did happen, and now we deal with the consequences. That night, Marina slept in the guest room. I lay awake in our bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the board meeting tomorrow and the presentation I'd been preparing for weeks. Pierce was gone, but the damage he'd done would take months to repair. The company would survive. I'd make sure of that. The marriage was a different question entirely. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. We need to talk. P. I deleted it without responding. Pierce Eldrow had said everything he needed to say in his resignation letter. Tomorrow, the board would learn the full extent of his betrayal. By the end of the week, the industry would know why he'd left so suddenly, and Marina would have to decide whether she wanted to be part of the solution or part of the wreckage Pierce had left behind. The Callen Architecture conference room felt different when you owned 60% of it. I sat at the far end of the polished table, watching board members file in with their coffee and concerned expressions, none of them recognizing the quiet man in the corner as their majority shareholder. Marina entered with the senior partners, her professional mask firmly in place. She'd dressed carefully this morning, conservative suit, minimal jewelry, the image of competent leadership. Only I could see the tension in her posture, the way her eyes avoided mine as she took her seat. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," began Harold Callen, the company founder who'd begged me for funding 3 years ago. "As you know, Pierce Eldrow submitted his resignation yesterday. We need to discuss transition plans and—" "Before we discuss transition," I interrupted, standing up, "I think the board needs to understand why Pierce resigned." Harold frowned. "I'm sorry, but this is a closed board meeting. Spouses aren't—" "I'm not here as Marina's spouse." I moved to the presentation screen, connecting my laptop. "I'm here as the representative of Braskin Holdings, majority shareholder of this company." The silence in the room was profound. Marina's face had gone pale, but she kept her composure. The other board members looked confused, then shocked as the implications sank in. "That's impossible," said Janet Morrison, the senior partner. "Braskin Holdings is just an investment firm. We've never met their representatives." "You've met me. I've been to every company picnic, every holiday party, every corporate event for the past 3 years. I've listened to your strategic discussions over dinner, reviewed your quarterly reports through my wife's briefings, and watched this company nearly collapse under systematic corporate espionage." The first slide appeared on the screen. Pierce's email communications with Meridian Group, timestamps clearly visible. "Pierce Eldrow has been selling our confidential information to competitors for 18 months. Every major contract we've lost, every project that faced mysterious regulatory delays, every bid that somehow came in just under ours. It all traces back to information Pierce provided to outside parties." I clicked to the next slide, bank records showing Pierce's stock trades, each one preceded by a leaked announcement from Callen Architecture. "The SEC will be opening an investigation into insider trading at Meridian Group within 48 hours. When they trace the information sources, they'll find a pattern that leads directly back to Pierce and his communications with this company." Harold leaned forward, studying the screen. "How did you obtain these communications?" "Forensic audit. When I noticed performance irregularities last year, I hired investigators to identify the source. It took months to build a complete picture, but the evidence is overwhelming." Marina finally spoke, her voice carefully controlled. "The board wasn't informed of any audit. The majority shareholder doesn't require board approval for protecting his investment." I met her eyes across the table. "Especially when the threat comes from within." Janet Morrison was scrolling through papers, connecting dots. "The Morrison project specifications. Pierce knew details that weren't in the general briefings. Information that was only discussed in preliminary meetings. Information that was taken home by senior staff and discussed with Pierce in informal settings. I clicked to another slide. Restaurant receipts, hotel charges, a pattern of meetings that went far beyond professional mentorship. The room fell silent again. Everyone understood what they were seeing, but no one wanted to be the first to say it aloud. Pierce cultivated relationships with key staff members, I continued. He gained access to confidential information through personal connections, then monetized that access through stock trades and information sales. The pattern is clear, documented, and legally actionable. Harold cleared his throat. What are you recommending? Complete forensic review of all projects Pierce touched, immediate security audit of our information systems, and a thorough investigation of how confidential information was being shared outside proper channels. Marina stood up abruptly. I need some air. She left the room, and I knew she was probably calling Pierce, warning him about the presentation, trying to figure out how much damage control was possible. It didn't matter. Pierce's phone was already under surveillance as part of the SEC investigation, and any communication with Callen Architecture employees would only strengthen the case against him. This is devastating, Janet said quietly. How do we recover from this kind of breach? We survive because we're financially stable and because we're removing the source of the leaks. Pierce's resignation eliminates the primary threat. The forensic review will identify any remaining vulnerabilities. And the staff members who shared information with Pierce? I clicked to the final slide, an organizational chart showing information flow patterns. Some were unwitting sources. They shared information in good faith, not realizing it was being monetized. Others may have been more directly involved. The investigation will determine the difference. Harold studied the chart, his expression grim. How long have you known? 18 months to build the case. 3 years to realize something was wrong. Pierce has been systematically bleeding this company since shortly after I provided the Series B funding. Why didn't you come forward sooner? Because I needed proof that would hold up under legal scrutiny. Corporate espionage cases require overwhelming evidence. Half measures and suspicions aren't enough when you're dealing with someone as careful as Pierce. Marina returned to the room, her composure restored but her hands shaking slightly. She'd made her phone calls, sent her warnings, tried to minimize the damage. It was too late for all of that. The board needs to vote on immediate measures, I continued. Security review, forensic audit expansion, and communication protocols to prevent future breaches. We also need to discuss Pierce's replacement and transition planning. What about criminal charges? Asked Janet. The SEC investigation will determine what charges are appropriate. Our focus should be on protecting the company and preventing future breaches. Harold called for a vote. The measures passed unanimously, with Marina abstaining. She sat quietly through the rest of the meeting, occasionally taking notes, but mostly staring out the window at the city skyline. After the other board members left, Marina and I were alone in the conference room. The presentation slides were still visible on the screen, Pierce's betrayal documented in emails and bank records. How long have you known about us? She asked quietly. About the affair? 6 months. About the information sharing? 18 months. About Pierce's character? From the moment I met him. She nodded slowly. What happens now? Now you decide whether you want to be part of the solution or part of the problem. The company will survive this. Pierce will not. The question is what happens to everyone else who got caught up in his scheme. Including me? Including you. Marina gathered her papers, stood up slowly. I'll cooperate with the investigation. Full disclosure, whatever you need. Good, because the alternative is being classified as a willing accomplice instead of an unwitting source. She walked to the door, then stopped. Evan? When this is over, when the investigation is complete and the company is stable, what happens to us? I looked at her across the empty conference room. This woman I'd loved for 20 years, who'd betrayed our marriage and nearly destroyed the company I'd saved. I don't know. She nodded and left. I stayed in the conference room for another hour, reviewing the presentation materials, thinking about the phone calls I'd need to make and the investigators I'd need to brief. Pierce Eldrow's resignation was just the beginning. The real work of rebuilding would take months. But first, I had to make sure there were no other surprises waiting to surface. 3 weeks after Pierce's resignation, I called an emergency board meeting at the lake house. Not the corporate conference room with its polished table and city views, but the place where Marina and I had planned our future together, where we dreamed of retirement and grandchildren and growing old beside the water. The forensic audit had revealed the full extent of the damage. Pierce hadn't just been selling information to Meridian Group. He'd been running a sophisticated operation, trading secrets with multiple competitors, manipulating stock prices, and using his position at Callen Architecture as the foundation for an insider trading network that stretched across the entire industry. Marina arrived first, pulling into the gravel driveway in her silver sedan. She'd been cooperative during the investigation, providing emails and phone records, testifying to investigators about her unwitting role in Pierce's scheme. But cooperation and forgiveness were different things entirely. "Thank you for coming," I said as she stepped onto the deck overlooking the lake. "Did I have a choice?" "Everyone has choices, Marina. The question is whether they make good ones." She sat down in one of the wooden chairs we'd bought together 5 years ago, when the lake house represented hope instead of reckoning. "What's this really about, Evan?" "Closure, understanding, the truth." A second car pulled into the driveway. Pierce Eldrow emerged, looking haggard and desperate. The SEC investigation had frozen his assets, and the industry blacklist had made him unemployable. His golden boy confidence had been replaced by the hollow look of a man watching his life collapse in real time. "You said you wanted to discuss a settlement?" Pierce called out as he approached the deck. "I said I wanted to discuss consequences," I corrected. "There's a difference." Marina looked surprised. "You invited Pierce?" "I invited everyone who played a role in this situation. We're going to have an honest conversation about what happened and why." Pierce climbed the deck stairs, his expensive suit wrinkled, and his usual swagger absent. "Look, I know you're angry, but we can work something out. I have information about Meridian Group's other sources. I can help you recover the losses." "Sit down, Pierce." He took the chair across from Marina, and I noticed how they avoided looking at each other. The passionate affair that had nearly destroyed my marriage had become a liability neither wanted to acknowledge. "The investigation is complete," I began, placing a folder on the table between us. "The SEC has enough evidence to pursue criminal charges for insider trading, corporate espionage, and securities fraud. Meridian Group is facing federal investigation, and 3 other companies have been implicated in the information trading network." Pierce's face went even paler. "What do you want?" "I want you to understand the full scope of what you've done, not just to the company, not just to the industry, but to the people who trusted you." I opened the folder, revealing photographs and documents. Janet Morrison's retirement portfolio, devastated because her company's stock price was manipulated by your leaked information. Harold Callen's family trust, depleted because competitors knew our bidding strategies in advance. 23 employees who lost bonuses because projects failed due to security breaches. Marina leaned forward, studying the documents. "I didn't realize the impact was so widespread." "Because you were thinking about pillow talk and hotel rooms instead of fiduciary responsibility," I replied. "Every secret you shared with Pierce became a weapon against the people we employed, the clients we served, the industry we were supposed to be building." Pierce shifted uncomfortably. Marina didn't know what I was doing with the information. Didn't she? I pulled out another set of documents: bank records, stock trades, financial transfers. Marina's personal trading account, Pierce. Stocks purchased just before major announcements, sold just before negative news broke. Either she's the luckiest amateur investor in history, or she knew exactly what information was valuable and when to act on it. Marina's composure finally cracked. "Those were your recommendations, Pierce. You said they were safe investments." "Safe investments based on insider information," I said quietly. "Information you provided, profits you shared, consequences you ignored." The lake was calm in the afternoon light, peaceful and deceptive. A family of ducks paddled near the shore, oblivious to the human drama playing out on the deck above. "What do you want from us?" Marina asked. "I want you to understand that actions have consequences. Pierce, your career is finished. The SEC will pursue criminal charges, and you'll likely face federal prison time. The industry knows what you did, and there's no coming back from that level of betrayal." Pierce nodded miserably. "I know. Marina, your situation is more complicated. You were an unwitting accomplice, but you also profited from the scheme. The company can survive your resignation, but it can't survive another breach of trust." She looked up sharply. "You want me to resign?" "I want you to take responsibility for your choices. The affair, the information sharing, the insider trading, all of it. Own it, accept the consequences, and figure out how to rebuild your integrity. And if I don't, then you'll be classified as a willing participant in Pierce's scheme. The SEC investigation will expand to include your trading activities, and you'll face the same criminal charges Pierce is facing." The silence stretched between us, broken only by the gentle lapping of water against the shore. Marina stared out at the lake, probably thinking about the future she'd imagined with Pierce, the career she'd built at Callen Architecture, the marriage she'd destroyed through her choices. Pierce finally spoke. "What about the settlement? You said we could work something out." "There is no settlement, Pierce. There's only justice and consequences. You betrayed everyone who trusted you, and now you'll face the legal and professional ramifications of those choices." I stood up, walked to the deck railing, looked out over the water. "This lake house was supposed to be our retirement home, Marina. The place where we'd grow old together, watch our grandchildren learn to swim, celebrate 50 years of marriage. Instead, it's become the place where we confront the wreckage of everything we built together." Marina joined me at the railing. "Can we rebuild? After everything that's happened, is there any way back?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "Trust, once broken, is difficult to repair. Love, once betrayed, leaves scars that never fully heal. The question isn't whether we can go back, it's whether there's any foundation left to build forward from." Pierce cleared his throat behind us. "I should go. The lawyers want to discuss plea options." "Pierce," I called as he reached the stairs. "For what it's worth, I hope you learn something from this. About loyalty, about consequences, about the difference between ambition and integrity." He nodded and left without another word. Marina and I stood at the railing, watching his car disappear down the gravel road, listening to the silence that followed. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you decide who you want to be. The woman who made terrible choices and learned from them, or the woman who made terrible choices and blamed everyone else for the consequences." She nodded slowly. "I'll submit my resignation tomorrow." "That's a start." We stood there until the sun began to set over the lake, two people who'd loved each other for 20 years, trying to figure out whether love was enough to overcome betrayal, whether forgiveness was possible when trust had been shattered so completely. The ducks had disappeared into the reeds. The lake was empty now, reflecting only sky and clouds and the fading light of a day that had changed everything. Marina's resignation letter arrived in my email at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, professionally written and carefully worded to minimize legal exposure. She cited personal reasons and desire to pursue new opportunities, the same sanitized language Pierce had used to mask his disgrace. I forwarded it to the board with a single line: "Effective immediately. Begin succession planning." The local business journal picked up the story within hours. "Callen Architecture faces executive exodus." The article speculated about financial difficulties and strategic disagreements, missing the real story entirely. Industry gossip filled the gaps with rumors about hostile takeovers and partnership disputes, none of them close to the truth. I let them speculate. The real story would emerge during Pierce's trial, when the full scope of his insider trading network became public record. Until then, Callen Architecture would weather the speculation and focus on rebuilding. My phone rang as I was reviewing resumes for Marina's replacement. Evan Grafton? Speaking. This is David Chen from Meridian Group. I think we should meet. I leaned back in my office chair, looking out at the lake where Marina and I had confronted Pierce 3 days earlier. David Chen, Pierce's primary contact at our biggest competitor, the man who'd been buying our secrets for 18 months. I don't think we have anything to discuss, David. I think we do. Pierce Eldrow wasn't the only source of information we had at Callen Architecture. There are other people involved, people you haven't identified yet. The threat was subtle but clear. Chen was suggesting he had additional sources inside my company, other employees who'd been selling information. He wanted a meeting to discuss terms, probably some kind of immunity deal in exchange for revealing his network. Where do you want to meet? Riverside Grill downtown, 1 hour. I hung up and called the FBI agent handling Pierce's case. If Chen wanted to reveal additional sources, he could do it under federal supervision with full legal protections for everyone involved. The Riverside Grill was busy with the lunch crowd when I arrived. Chen was already seated at a corner table, looking nervous and checking his phone constantly. He was younger than I'd expected, probably early 30s, with the aggressive confidence of someone who'd built a career on other people's secrets. "Thank you for coming," he said as I sat down. "You have 5 minutes." He slid a manila envelope across the table. Photos, emails, bank records. Pierce wasn't our only source at Callen Architecture. We had 3 other employees providing information, including someone on your board of directors. I opened the envelope, scanning the documents inside. More hotel receipts, more secret meetings, more evidence of systematic betrayal. But these names were different. Employees I'd trusted, board members I'd worked with for years. "What do you want, Chen?" "Immunity. Full cooperation with federal investigators in exchange for no criminal charges. I'll provide everything: names, dates, amounts, the complete network. And if I refuse, then these other sources continue operating, and you never identify all the leaks in your organization." Pierce was just the tip of the iceberg. I closed the envelope, studied Chen's face. He was scared, desperate, trying to trade information for freedom. The federal investigation had him cornered, and he was looking for any way out. "The FBI is already investigating your communications with Pierce. They'll find these other sources with or without your cooperation." "Maybe. But how long will that take? How much more damage will be done while you're searching for leaks you don't even know exist?" My phone buzzed with a text message from Marina. "Can we talk? There's something I need to tell you." I showed Chen the message. "Looks like your leverage just disappeared." His face went pale. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Marina Grafton just realized that cooperation with federal investigators is better than being classified as an unindicted co-conspirator. She's going to tell them everything she knows about information sharing at Callen Architecture, including details about other employees who might have been involved." Chen's phone rang. He answered it, listened for a moment, then hung up, looking defeated. "My lawyer says the FBI wants to meet this afternoon. Full disclosure, no immunity deals." "Good luck with that." I left him at the table and drove back to the lake house. Marina's car was in the driveway, and I found her sitting on the deck where we'd confronted Pierce, staring out at the water. "Thank you for coming," she said without turning around. "What did you need to tell me?" There were others. Other employees Pierce was getting information from. I didn't realize it at the time, but some of our conversations included details that could only have come from multiple sources. She handed me a notebook filled with names, dates, and details. I've been reconstructing everything I can remember from the past 18 months. Every conversation with Pierce, every piece of information that might have been shared, every employee who might have been involved. I scanned the list, recognizing names from Chen's envelope. Marina had independently identified most of the same sources the FBI would eventually discover through their investigation. Why are you telling me this now? Because it's the right thing to do. Because I want to help fix what I helped break. And because I want you to know that I understand the full scope of what I've done. I sat down beside her, both of us looking out at the lake where we'd planned to grow old together. The FBI will want to interview you formally. Everything you've written here will become part of the federal case against Pierce and Chen. I know. Your cooperation will help, but it won't erase what happened. The affair, the betrayal, the damage to our marriage, none of that goes away because you're helping with the investigation. She nodded. I know that too. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the water and watching clouds move across the sky. 20 years of marriage reduced to a federal investigation and a notebook full of names. What happens when this is over? Marina asked finally. I don't know. The company will recover. Pierce and Chen will face criminal charges. The industry will learn from this and implement better security protocols. But us? I honestly don't know if there's an us to salvage. She stood up, gathered her notebook and purse. I'll call the FBI this afternoon. Full cooperation, whatever they need. Marina? She stopped at the deck stairs. For what it's worth, I'm glad you're doing the right thing now. It doesn't fix everything, but it's a start. She nodded and left. I stayed on the deck until sunset, thinking about consequences and choices, about the difference between justice and revenge, about whether love could survive betrayal when both parties were willing to face the truth. The lake was calm, reflecting the sky like a mirror. Peaceful and deceptive, hiding depths that could only be measured by those willing to dive beneath the surface. Tomorrow, the FBI would begin interviewing the additional sources Marina had identified. Within a week, the full scope of Pierce's network would be exposed. Within a month, criminal charges would be filed against everyone involved. Callen Architecture would survive. My marriage might not. But for the first time in 18 months, I knew the truth about what had happened and why. That would have to be enough.